Hey, Jonathan, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, Simon.
Yeah, so the reason I had you on is because there's this big news last week that the Atlantic, the prestigious magazine, was launching this new program where it's basically rolling out something like a dozen different newsletters that are authored by a single person. And in the process, it's basically luring in all these star writers, some of whom had left their mainstream media jobs to write newsletters for places like Substack. So they had basically left the mainstream media, were launching their own kind of entrepreneurial endeavors with newsletters, and now they were being lured back into the fold. To write for the Atlantic, and details are kind of scarce in terms of like what the actual deals are, but it seems like they're going to be getting some of the perks of running your own newsletter, where you get a cut of subscription money, and you get a little bit of editorial independence, being able to write about whatever you want, although there is going to be some editorial oversight. But this seems to be kind of the response to the rise of platforms like Substack, where these platforms are convincing these star writers to basically quit their full-time jobs and launch out on their own. And this is the mainstream media's kind of response to that, to try to kind of adapt their business models so that they don't lose their star writers. So to kind of start with, I mean, this is something that's been happening for 2 or 3 years. We've seen several major defections to Substack. Do you think that platforms like Substack, like they actually pose a real threat to mainstream media outlets?
Absolutely. One of the great revelations that we learned from old media's battle with new media is that individual writers command great loyalty. Nate Silver, Ezra Klein, Andrew Sullivan all bring outsized traffic to whichever website they're writing for, and old, or I guess big media is certainly right to losing is right to worry about losing its stars. That said, and this is a big but, the big outlets are like big sports teams. They're bigger than one or two people. Their bench is deep. Part of an editor's job is to cultivate talent. And so when the Times loses, this is a recent example, a prized op-ed columnist like Nick Kristof, the paper always bounces back.
Yeah, but like my thinking is that they put all that time investing in kind of newer talent and building up their brands, and then lose them at the exact moment that their value is maximized. So that actually creates like really bad like economic incentives for the media companies, because they're putting all this investment training kind of newer writers that probably take a lot more kind of you know care and editing and all that kind of stuff. They're more expensive to kind of mentor, and then right when they hit that point where they're have their own kind of personal brand and they have a lot of potential for bringing in readers and stuff, that's the exact point that they're leaving to launch on their own endeavor.
I'm more skeptical of that than you are. I think, for example, of Mike Isaac at the New York Times. I think a tech reporter wrote a book, came back to Facebook. Farhad Manjoo, one of my favorite op-ed columnists, used to be a tech columnist. The Times has it's a huge place. The newsroom, I think, is bigger than anyone else's, and I think it is unwise to underestimate the depth of their talent, even if, as you say, some of the higher profile names are cashing out as good capitalists at the height of their earning potential.
Well, we're just speaking solely with New York Times. There are a lot of other outlets, but since we're on the subject of the New York Times, I'm not sure if you saw this, but the New York Times, like recently within the last few months, issued an edict to all of their writers, all their journalists who are on the staff, that they actually have to get permission if they launch, on Substack or Review or one of these other platforms. And basically you can kind of see this as like they view these platforms as competing, and they're trying to stop their writers from defecting, or at least testing out the waters on another platform before making the jump. I mean, do you think this is a smart play on their part?
Oh, it's colossally well. So, is it a smart play? I mean, I dislike it, but yes, I do think it makes business sense. And here's the example that I like to cite: John Carreyrou. was a star investigative reporter at the Wall Street Journal. Won, I think, 2 Pulitzers. He's the guy that we all know for writing the Elizabeth Holmes story about Theranos being a fraud. When the Journal cracked down on what and the exact practice that you're referring to, he left. He took his talents, as LeBron James said, to freelance world, and he's doing a podcast. He wrote the book. So the Journal lost a major a star. However, I don't know. Rupert Murdoch and his empire seem to be doing okay. So as much as you and I think this is, the incentives are misaligned, I go back to the original point that these places are so big, they're not going to miss a few people.
Well, I mean, I guess also I just wonder why Substack, like why are they honing in on a single medium? Like one of the reason why a lot of these writers are able to leave is because they have huge audiences on places like Twitter, but they're not banning their writers from having Twitter accounts, obviously, because they get a lot of benefit from them having huge followings on Twitter. It just seems like they're just it just seems like a misguided attempt to stave off a competitor when in reality it's just like it's the same old debate of should we ban our writers from having blogs or something like that, things that we don't even argue over anymore.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The line is arbitrary. What's really the difference between a blog and a tweet and an e-newsletter? Basically, money and or maybe I'd say it's the medium du jour. Everyone wants an e-newsletter now, and they're monetizing that. You can't really monetize a tweet, even with the tip jar. People are monetizing to, as you pointed out, 6 figures, even close to 1 million with Substack, and that's real money. So I think for the mainstream media, where they're drawing the line is not always clear, but you know it when you see it, which is to say money.
Yeah, I mean, I think a better line to draw, if you're going to draw that line, is maybe is stopping at a paid newsletter. Like it's okay to have a free newsletter, but the second that you launch a paid version, you're basically creating economic incentives for yourself to hold back reporting from your day job and report and give it to your paying subscribers. Like there's basically dual interests there. What would you think about that?
Yeah, this is the Bob Woodward conundrum, right?
Yeah, yeah,
He's not paid by the Washington Post. Hasn't, as I understand it, for a long time. He's just been in title only, and so it's less of a sort of dual interest sort of scenario. But he does save his biggest scoops for his books. And what's worse, sometimes his paper, the Washington Post, does not even get the exclusive on his new book. Sometimes it's the New York Times. So yeah,
yeah.
listen, I have a lot of sympathy for the editors and standards executives at the mainstream media who are just making these decisions because there's no right answer. I think the best they can do is talk with the unions, involve the newsroom, and be totally transparent. There's nothing worse than when, like, was it Wesley Lowery from the Washington Post who left because, in part, because of his social media activity that the Post bigwigs looked down upon.
Yeah, so like that's what the restrictions have been thus far is based on individual content and restrictions about what you can write about versus actual platforms you could write for. So you're allowed obviously to tweet, but but every platform has social media policies that restrict what you can tweet. With Bob Woodward, I don't know what their arrangement is now, but certainly in his earlier days after publishing all the president's men, he still was a writer for the Washington Post. And yeah, that was a heavy criticism that a lot of scoops ended up in his books that came out months after they could have been reported in the newspaper, and there was that question of kind of dual loyalty. But obviously the Washington Post benefited from his celebrity status and from running excerpts of his books in the newspaper. So one of the writers who left the Atlantic was Charlie Warzel. About 7 months ago, he was a star columnist at the New York Times. He basically quit his job and launched a Substack called Galaxy Brain. Now he's going back to Substack, or going back to the Atlantic, so back within the arms of mainstream media. And he wrote a post talking about why he did it. And a lot of people are claiming that he failed on Substack, but if you look at his actual post, he was in only 7 months. He had over 1,400 paying subscribers. and was already making six figures. I mean, do you think he should have stuck it out on Substack?
Far be it for me to criticize or second guess a guy like Charlie Warzel. The decision about where and how to make a living is profoundly personal. So what I will say is, you want to say something?
No, keep on going.
Oh, what I will say is that a job is more than money. It's about the prestige of your byline. It's about the colleagues you work with, the managers you report to, work-life balance, mandatory meetings. Something I think you and I share a viewpoint on. It's about the option to work from an office, to have an office, or even the chance to do something different. So I credit Charlie for two things. Number one, the transparency. I thought that retrospective that he wrote was brilliant. And the second thing, I credit him for being a risk taker. He's willing to take a risk, say, nah, this isn't really what I wanted, and move on to the next thing, even if it's sort of evolutionary rather than revolutionary.
Yeah, the prestige factor is interesting, and that's something that goes along with the New York Times. It's like I think there are writers like me who crave that prestige factor a lot less, but there are a lot of writers out there who want to say they work for the Atlantic, they want to say they work for the New Yorker or the New York Times, and I don't think we should undercount that, like the brand as a key motivator that these media companies can leverage.
Well, yeah, the thing that occurred to me is, imagine you're at a White House news briefing. Oh, Simon Owens. Hi, I'm Simon Owens. I'm from Substack. And, Jen Psaki says, who? This is like BuzzFeed, I think, with Obama, the first time BuzzFeed was invited to a White House press briefing. There's tremendous cachet. In just and don't get me wrong, the White House people know what Substack is. They know all these folks, but there's still tremendous cachet in name recognition to say Jonathan Rick, The Atlantic, Jonathan Rick, Forbes, Jonathan Rick, The New York Times, versus what is Casey Newton's publication? Is it
The
the
platformer.
Platformer? I know who he is, but I can't even cite his name, the name of his publication off the top of my head. So never discount that. And listen, credit to Charlie. I'm sure he made a bunch of money. I hope that he stocked some of it away. And he will. I don't think he's one of the writers, unlike most, who will probably never lack for gainful employment.
Yeah, and it seems like, and we'll get a little bit more into this, but for specifically the Atlantic, again, the details are a little bit uh, vague, but it seems like he kind of gets the best of both worlds. He still has editorial independence, but he has the benefits of an Atlantic editor who's going to be helping him in some way. He also has the Atlantic's massive distribution. Like, obviously, its combined social media presence is in the millions, and it has this great brand. He alludes to it vaguely, but he's going to get some kind of payout based on the subscribers he brings in. I don't know how that's going to be calculated, but presumably, if somebody converts to becoming a paid subscriber on one of his newsletters, he might get a cut of that. So it seems like there's going to be a little bit. It's not like he's just going back to having a regular column. It seems like there's going to be kind of a mix of the benefits of both having an independent Substack and working for a mainstream news organization.
Yeah, I mean, these guys, everyone's sort of figuring this out as they go along, and I think smart organizations, to entice star writers over to their platform, will try the proverbial all of the above box. They're
Mhm.
just, I mean, I wrote down a few of these. You can split subscription fees, you can split ad revenue, you can hand out bonuses for revenue targets, you can offer multi-year contracts, you can give these guys access to your Slack channels. You can provide them tech support and an assistant and a copy editor. You can give their subscribers, as The Atlantic is doing, free access to the larger publication. You can relax your exclusivity edicts. In other words, you cannot write for anybody else as long as I'm employing you. You can also, and I would love to see this, you can feature your marquee writers in an ad campaign. And I think smart publications go into this as they do sort of any salary negotiation. It's a negotiation, and there's a lot of flexibility. Can't give you more money, but we can give you 2 more weeks of extra vacation.
Yeah, and there's you know, you talk to creators and there is that unending churn of like having to always be on, always be producing content. Whereas now Charlie's part of a bundle. And so yeah, taking that 2 weeks of vacation, there's probably a lot less guilt because he's not holding up the entire operation. But the Atlantic, it's one of the first movers. There are a few others that are doing this. Forbes is partnering with newsletter writers to in some capacity. The Information is starting a newsletter network of some sort where, in addition to its $400 a year product, you can pay to subscribe to these individual newsletters. It just started one with electric cars, and it just absorbed another newsletter called Parkour. I think, like, obviously we're moving towards a world where more and more newspapers and other legacy media outlets start designing these. And so, you know, kind of talking about what you were just discussing about all the perks, what are the ways that you would probably, you know, one of your writers comes to you, one of your star writers, and says, I'm thinking about leaving to go launch on Substack or review or whatever. What are the ways that you structure a deal to try to get them to stay?
I mean, the ones that I guess I just ticked off. I mean, this is not an area you know more about this than I do, and I guess I would approach it from a perspective of transparency. Listen, here are the menu of options we can offer you. We can, I'm authorized, short of going to the publisher, of paying you $150,000 a year. However, you can double that with certain targets. Or actually, Simon, you know what I would say? Just thought of this. So remember when everybody was courting Megyn Kelly after she left Fox?
Yeah, I mean, I
I,
remember she was on the look for a job. Yeah,
I forget where she ended up. I want to say it was NBC,
NBC.
and I think it was Andy Lack who courted her. And from what I read, every of all of Andy Lack's competitors came to Megan with an offer. They said, "We're prepared to offer you X, Y, and Z." Andy Lack said the reason that he won her over is he did not come to her with a package. He came to her with a question. He said, "What do you want?" And she said, "I want to spend more time with my 3 young boys." I think she has 3 young boys. And so, if you want to work with, you want to poach Simon Owens from Simon Owens Media and Tech newsletter, you ask them, what is the most important thing to you? And you try and work backward from there.
Yeah. I mean, one analogy that we could draw is with, you know, the book publishing and like the record labels and how they work with, you know, content creators, so-called content creators versus the media industry, where at a newspaper you pay a salary and then that person works a 9 to 5 job. Whereas in like book publishing, you sign a contract, you pay in advance, and then once that author has earned out the advance, then they start earning royalties. Seems like it's not a far stretch to think of just taking something like that, where they have some kind of base salary, and once they earn out that base salary, then they're suddenly taking a cut of every new subscription that's coming in.
Yeah, hey, one of the most beautiful, I think, results of what we're experiencing is capitalism at its finest. And as you pointed out, writers are rightly being compensated for the fruit. They're owning more of the fruit of their labor. So this is great because, especially for folks like you and me who are freelancers, we know this lesson all too well. Doing the work is only half the job. The second half is, how do you monetize it? How do you build a business? And I feel like we sort of get a mini MBA every day by bringing on new clients or setting price points or varying. I mean, for you, you've written about this. How do you vary the call to action in your newsletter? You don't just use the exact same line each time. And so one of the things that I've just been grateful to watch is that these guys are learning the business side of the practice. There used to be this, like, well, there still is, but there used to be this severe strict Chinese firewall
Yeah.
between the sales guys and the newsroom. And I remember, I think Hamilton Nolan, I think, maybe wrote about this over at Gawker years ago. It became so extreme in some places that writers were banned from even looking at their metrics. Now,
Yeah.
that's not true today. Every writer, probably has access to Chartbeat or whatever the internal proprietary tool is. And I think that's a good thing. I think the target, revenue targets, where we can give you a bonus if you, bring in 20% 20% more subscribers. This is a good thing because it really shows that Well, it makes you, it not only makes you accountable, but it also creates tremendous incentives.
Yeah, like the whole Chinese firewall was supposed to protect the journalists from any kind of influence or bias that was business related, but it also benefited the publisher because once you divorce the writer from the business side, then they lost basically all negotiating power because they couldn't really quantify their worth or their value at all.
Yeah, yeah. This is how do I put it? Competition means better compensation. And listen, I'm a writer and I'm a capitalist, so I believe this is an unqualified good. We're living in, we're going to look back on this in 10 years, whenever the model is established, and we're going to say these were the golden ages. What I wouldn't kill to be courted by the Atlantic and the Times and Substack and the Information.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, those were all the questions I had for you. Give me the 30-second pitch for what your business offers.
Sure. So I specialize in two areas. I am a ghostwriter and I am a speaker. I help smart people write smart things, whether that's a Wikipedia article, a slide deck, or an op ed. And I deliver workshops on topics such as business writing, communication, and social media. The best place to learn more about me is my website. That's jonathanrick.com. And I'm going to be an infomercial podcaster. That's JONATHANRICK.com.
Okay. Well,
Thanks, Simon.
we'll certainly flash that on the screen. All right. Well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure.